And now, it's time for the Well-Read Llama with your host, author Erin Mifflin.
Hello, listeners. Are you enjoying this tail end of summer? I hope you're fitting in all you want to do before school starts and things are more structured again. I do love some good structure, but of course I love summer too. And I hope you're getting in some good reading. Last night the book I was reading got really good, that part where you don't want to put it down, but I had to go to sleep. So hopefully I can get back to it today. I'm looking forward to that. Our guest today is award-winning author Amanda Cox. She has a brand new book coming out soon, and she's here to tell us all about it. We'll also discuss her previous books, her family, and her publishing journey. Before becoming a novelist, Amanda was a licensed therapist. I look forward to hearing more about her own personal story. Before we begin, I'd appreciate it if you would take a moment to follow me on social media. You can find me on Facebook or Instagram at author Erin Mifflin. I'm still in my own publishing journey, so I don't have any books out yet, but I look forward to that happy day. I would be honored if you would choose to come along and cheer for me on this path. Now, let's bring in our guest. Hello, Amanda, and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Erin.
Oh, you're welcome. So your new book, The Bitter End Birding Society, releases later this month. What is this book about?
So this book is about a young woman who, because of the way that she handles this traumatic circumstance in her hometown, she's kind of considered a hometown hero. Everybody's celebrating what she's done, and she's kind of had to live with that over her school year, knowing deep in her heart, at least from her perspective, that she's not a hero, that she actually made the whole situation worse. And she has been trying to help her classroom get through this circumstance. And now that it's summer break, she's like, I'm going to the little town of Bitter End, Tennessee to just be anonymous a little while where nobody knows who I am and get to know my great aunt, who I don't really know that side of my family history very well. And I'm going to get to know my family. But her time in Bitter End does not go to plan, and before she knows it, she's adopted against her will by, well, at least a little bit against her will, by a ragtag group of bird watchers. And along the way, as she's enjoying the great outdoors and finding some peace and restoration in that process, she realizes that she has a family connection to one of the bird watchers. And this piece of her family tree is severed because of a feud that happened when a moonshiner's daughter fell in love with a preacher's son. And so she starts to try to piece back together and try to help these two women who, even though they live on the same street, have been estranged for over 60 years.
Okay. So I kind of like the premise there where she knows like she is a hero, but there's part of her that knows that it might not have been as heroic as it seemed, huh?
Yeah, and so it was interesting kind of exploring the concept that sometimes a compliment can be just as difficult to receive or even more difficult to receive than a critique.
Yeah, that is true. Now, are you a bird watcher yourself?
I would consider myself a backyard bird watcher. I like to enjoy my backyard birds. Sometimes I'll adventure out and see the birds that are out there. I kind of got started with this about 15 years ago now, when my firstborn arrived on the scene, and he was a fussy, colicky baby who was only content if I was standing and swaying with him. And one day I found myself looking out in the backyard, and the more that I watched, the more surprised I was by the different species of birds that were out there in my yard. And so instead of fretting over why I couldn't get my child to settle, I started to relax in those moments and enjoy the birds and learn about the birds. And so for me, it was kind of like I was there to comfort my child, and the birds I felt like God brought to me as a way to comfort me in that season.
Wow, that is a really sweet story. I love hearing kind of like, like the origin sort of where this story came from.
Yes.
And so this book, like most of your others, has a focus on family. Why do you think you're drawn to write about families?
I think that there's just something about families and family dynamics that are so foundational to our identity and who we are and how we see ourselves. So if you take somebody who even like they've grown up in a family and say they move away and they're kind of living their own separate life, it is amazing to me how they come back home for the visit for the holidays, how quickly they slip back into those exact same roles, even though they've like tried to separate themselves from it. that family dynamic, they're back in that role and they are living that role all over again when they're back together. And so I think it's so interesting to look at families and how families interact and how they shape us, the great things, the beautiful things, and then some of the things are like, oh, maybe that's something that I need to work on and grow from beyond those moments. So I just love how I think just how foundational they are to our identity, for better or for worse.
Right. That's true. And I like the way you talk about those family roles. That's something that one of my friends group in particular, we talk about, you always end up playing this role and, how can we maybe redefine that if it's not healthy? Or in my family, we've gone through some things and we've talked about, all right, well now, we can decide if we want to keep these traditions or if we want to change our traditions. Something that we've talked about in my family, just been aware of, if something isn't working, we can change it, or we can reach out to the people who sometimes might not get invited to all the family get-togethers, or, whatever, just trying to make positive changes to be the best that we can be.
Right. Just because it feels like we're stuck in a particular role does not necessarily mean we actually are. It just might take some work to find a new role.
Right. And so I understand this book has dual timelines. What do you enjoy about writing a dual timeline story?
So I kind of have two answers to that question. One ties in a lot with my focus on family, and it's just the concept of how the past impacts the present, and in really unique ways. And sometimes it's in ways that we realize, and sometimes it's in ways that we don't realize. And so with the two timelines, I have fun kind of exploring how the past does impact the present. I particularly love it when I have a character who is present in both timelines. So with the Bitter and Birding Society, one character that you get to see in both timelines is Cora, which is Anna's aunt, the main character. And you get to see her as an 8-year-old girl, and then you get to see her as a 74-year-old woman, and how the things that happened during this year of her life when she was 8 years old has impacted the way that she interacts with the world all these years later. And so I really love exploring those things through a dual timeline. From the writer perspective, my less poignant answer is it's wonderful to have two timelines, because if you get stuck writing one timeline, I like to just go over to the other timeline for a while. I'm like, I don't know what needs to happen right here. And so I'll work on the other timeline, and then it'll kind of like unlock a key. And it's like, oh, that's what I need, what that story was missing over there. So those are my reasons I love dual timelines.
That is cool. Yes, when I first read Dual Timeline, and this was several years ago, it wasn't my favorite until I read one where I could really see for the first time how the timelines really interacted with each other, and the fact that the author didn't make me wait till like the end to bring it together, but when I can kind of see it all throughout, that really is what pulls me in. So I am a dual timeline fan now. Not at first, but when you're talking about like the stories where you can see how they are throughout, that's what really grabs me.
Yeah, I enjoy that as well.
So in your last book, Between the Sound and Sea, your character is renovating a lighthouse and finds handwritten papers tucked into the walls. Have you ever uncovered anything like that in your life, or was that all imagination?
It just kind of comes from a fantasy of mine. Like, I would love for that to happen to me. I would love to just be looking through an old house or an older structure and just being able to find something that hints at a little piece of history that's been buried. So I've always been like, oh, that'd be so cool. And so it was really fun to pair that with a lighthouse, because there's something cool and romantic about lighthouses in general. They just seem very storied structures, and it was fun to hide things in the walls of a lighthouse. And it was really funny, though. Between the Sound and Sea was already written, and I was researching for the Bitter and Birding Society and took a trip trying to find Bitter End. That's a long story of trying to find Bitter End, but in the process of that, I met a lady, and we were hoping she knew about the area, but she didn't. But she did know about her house, and she was telling us about renovating her historic home in the area. And as they were renovating, they found letters that had slipped through the floorboards of the house, and it had all these juicy details about this romance, and she was telling us all about them. I'm like, hey, one day I'm going to find some letters like that in an old house.
Yes. Yeah, the closest thing I can think of is it has not happened to me personally, but two people that I know have been like working on renovating a part of their house, and they found like written on the boards something from the original person who just like jotted down a note or a phone number. And so one of them just happened a couple of weeks ago to a friend of mine, and her father had been doing this project, and he had been like listening to the radio or something, and he wrote this phone number and some notes down, and then he has since passed away, but she saw that and it was such a special reminder to her of, what her dad liked to do and listen. And so that was a cool story.
That's really fun.
It's not quite the same, but it was someone that she knew and it was very poignant to her.
Yeah, I love that.
So, and He Should Have Told the Bees, which is another one of your books that I really enjoyed. Your characters are brought together over the inheritance of a bee farm. And if I'm remembering correctly, you keep bees yourself, or you have in the past, don't you?
I do. I don't keep them on the scale of my main character, who has 50 hives. I have a couple that I keep in my backyard as a bit of a hobby. And so it was really fun. I was trying to decide the next book that I wanted to write. And I'm like, oh, I so want to write bees. There's something just so special about honeybees and opening up a hive. And I don't know, just the collective power of those tiny little beings. You can feel it when you take the lid off of that hive. And such unique symbolism that paired well with the lives of these women. And so that was a lot of fun to write.
And your first two books, The Edge of Belonging and The Secret Keepers of Old Depot Grocery, both won Christie Awards, and not just in their categories, but also Book of the Year. So what was it like to see those stories honored in such a way?
That was, wow, is the only word that kind of comes to mind. It was such a surreal experience for me. I had gone to the Christie Awards when I was not yet a published author, because it had occurred in Nashville, which is not a far drive from my house, and they have a short writer conference that goes with it. And I would go and enjoy the conference, getting to hear authors that I admire accept their awards. And it was just always such an inspiring time. But then to have my own books up there was just, it just didn't really feel real to me. And then, especially with my debut, because, when you write that debut book, you don't really know if anyone's ever going to read that book. But then to have it honored in such a way was just really special to me.
That is so cool. I've kind of had a similar experience in going to American Christian Fiction Writers with the Genesis contest. And that's one that I had entered several times and watched people. And then it is just so special when they call your name and you're like, well, this is a dream come true. I'm actually in this moment and this is happening. So it is really cool. So you mentioned a little bit about your publishing journey, attending the conference before you were published, and your website describes you as a therapist turned novelist. Can you tell us about your journey from counseling to becoming a published author?
So growing up, I was always a lover of story. I loved to read everything I could get my hands on. And I was a writer in the sense that I process the world best, whether it's an emotion or a situation, when I have a piece of paper and a pen in my hand. But I never necessarily thought I'm going to pursue writing as a career. So when I went to school for counseling. And because I really do love walking with people through those challenging moments and help them process, think through things, decide if the coping skills that they're using are actually working for them, or if there's another better, more healthier way to go forward. And so that was kind of my life and what I did. Then when my second child was about to be born, just circumstances made it best for our family for me to be able to stay home. And I was very grateful that I was able to stay home. But it was a big switch up from sitting down with counseling clients on a daily basis. And one day I just felt like God nudging my heart to write this story. And I was like, well, you know what? Let's just see if I can. Let's see if I can write a full-length, like novel-length book. So it took a lot of years for that to happen. I had little kids, but when they were sleeping, it was kind of my way to relax and unwind and just be me for a little bit. And then when it was done, my personality would be just to put that in a drawer, and like to have written it is good enough. But I just felt God nudging my heart that if he gives us gifts, they're meant to be shared. And I didn't know if that meant sharing it with my next door neighbor and just letting them enjoy the story, or if it was meant for a wider audience. But then I just was challenging myself that I didn't want to be the limiting factor. So I started kind of exploring what that publication journey looks like. And so lots of years, lots of rejections later, I have books on the shelf, which is wild. And it's just really neat seeing the way two things I didn't think paired together, education and counseling and fiction writing. It's not two things I would have dreamed up for myself. But I look back on it, I'm like, God, you knew all along. what you had in mind for me. And writing just fits me in a way that nothing else fits me. And I am so grateful to have the opportunity to be able to share my heart with the world in that way.
Oh, yes. I love how God uses everything, even the twists in the road that we don't see coming. We might not be able to see how they fit together right away or even for a little ways down the road, but he does bring everything. When we are following him, nothing is wasted. He's going to use
Yes.
all of it. So another thing on your website that talks about is it's very just clear from your bio how much you love your family. What do you enjoy most about being a wife and mother?
I think one thing that I have just really enjoyed is just the different ages and stages that I've gotten to experience with my kids. I mean, even with my husband and myself, we married when we were really young. We were 20 and 21. And so almost 21 years later, we've gone through a lot. We've gone through some ages and stages ourselves. But it's been so fun watching the kids grow from, that baby face, that kids stage, and now we're kind of venturing into those teenage years and just getting to see them become the person God created them to be in new ways and new facets, even sometimes in the hard things and in the struggle that, I can remember those growing pains as a kid too, but getting to walk those with them is really special. And just getting to travel together, see the world when we can, just getting like they have these unique perspectives that sometimes are a little bit of a reflection of me, but then sometimes they're completely different and uniquely their own. And just getting to celebrate that is a lot of fun.
That is really cool. And so on your website, you also have a shop where you sell different things. So what can you tell the listeners about things that you have on your shop?
So right now I have signed paperbacks that are available. So if you're wanting to maybe gift a copy of a book or something like that, or you just would like to collect signed copies yourself, I have those available. And I'm working on having a few items that relate to the Better End Birding Society to offer that are fun. So I like to have little things that are representative of the books along with the books. And then sometimes I'll have a little gift box or something like that that's available during holidays or release times and things like that. So it's been fun building that up a little bit.
That is cool. So listeners, if they're interested, should check back often and see if you've updated, huh?
Yes, got some new things coming.
So now back to your novels. One thing that reviewers talk about is the themes of hope and healing and faith. And so I wanted to ask you, why is it important to you to include those in your stories?
I think that for me, a lot of what is reflected in the storytelling that happens, you might be reading about a bee farm, you might be reading about an abandoned lighthouse or a quirky group of bird watchers. But one thing that is underneath all of it is there's hope. And I tend to put my characters through some things. They've got some struggles and things that they need to heal from. But I want to encourage readers that in their struggles, they can struggle with hope, not with despair. That when they close that book, there's going to be a sense of hope that these characters are moving in the right direction and they're finding the healing that they need. And it's just so much a part of kind of my heartbeat, my own life experiences, my experiences sitting down with counseling clients. And then it's just that element of faith because that's ultimately where the hope comes from. We don't always have all the answers, but we have that faith that God is holding us in his hands and that even through the difficult times, we're not walking through those alone. And those elements are just so much my heartbeat that it just spills into the stories as I write them.
Yep, it's just your heart on the page, right?
Absolutely.
So is there a scripture that has been meaningful to you recently?
A scripture that has stood out to me recently is the account of Jacob wrestling with God in Genesis 32. I, in the past, confess that he's not necessarily an individual from scripture that immediately drew my attention in the sense that, sometimes we have individuals from scripture that whether it's their personality or their experience, it just sort of resonates with who you are. And you're like, I feel like they would understand me. But personality wise, Jacob is called the deceiver. And I'm just sort of the person like, what you see is what you get. I mean, I would not be very good at being sneaky. But Jacob, when he is wrestling with God, I was recently in church. The sermon was about his wrestling and how we could wrestle with hope or we could wrestle with despair, and how Jacob wrestled with hope that if he continued wrestling, that there would be a blessing at the end of it. And it really just struck me, thinking through that myself, like when I wrestle with things within my faith, do I wrestle with hope or with despair? And the other question that was posed was, are you a safe place for people to wrestle with God? Like if they have questions, if they are struggling with their faith, are you a safe place for someone to come? And that really just touched my heart because I realized that's so much my heartbeat for my stories. I want them to be a safe place where readers can wrestle with God because sometimes I have characters who wrestle with God. In the Bitter and Birding Society, there's a pastor who has had, and he's an ex-pastor during the story, and because he's had this crisis of faith, and he's like, I need to step away from this role. And there are times in his journey that he wrestles with despair, but with this, as the story progresses, I don't answer all the questions for him. He doesn't have everything neatly tied together at the end of the story, but he, at the end of the story, is wrestling with hope that he doesn't fully trust in the goodness, like head knowledge. He has that head knowledge of the goodness of God, but he doesn't know how to walk in that goodness of God. But in that wrestling, he finds that he can wrestle with hope towards the end of the story. And so I think that's just been a scripture that has really stuck with me recently, of my stories being a safe place for people to wrestle with their faith.
That's a great way to think about it, to approach your writing differently and your storytelling, as a safe place for others. I really like that. So how can readers connect with you?
You can find me at amandacoxwrites.com, and that I have a free short story that's there. That's where you can find my shop. You can find the descriptions of all of my books and see the newest things that are coming out. And then you can also find me on Facebook or Instagram by searching Amanda Cox Writes.
All right. And I hope that they will go find out more about you there. Listeners, please do go to amandacoxwrites.com to learn more about Amanda and her stories. Let me spell that for you. It's AmandaCoxWrites.com. Amanda Cox Writes. And don't forget also to check out her shop where she has those signed books, as well as some items that she'll be posting soon that is related to this story, The Bitter End Birding Society. If you enjoy Amanda's stories, some other authors that I would recommend to you would be Katie Powner, whose books are also just very thought-provoking, and I have loved every single one of them for their own reasons. We actually just had Katie on the show last week. So if you missed that interview, you can go find it on YouTube. Look for my channel, author Erin Mifflin, and her interview will be right there since we just had her on. And then also Sarah Brunsvold is another one that we've had on, and you can find her at the same place. But her stories also are often centered around families. They're women's fiction like Amanda writes, and I have always just appreciated all of hers as well. And one thing I love about these authors is you can hear it in these interviews. You can hear their hearts for their readers and their hearts for their stories and their hearts for the Lord. It is their desire that they would honor him and that they would draw people closer to him through stories, that stories are not just entertainment, but there's something that truly will uplift a reader as they're reading. Another women's fiction author, and she actually writes historical women's fiction, would be Amy Lynn Green. Her books are set during World War II, and they're just so interesting as well in the friendships that they present and the relationships, mothers and daughters and friendships, and all of these things that can draw the reader into the story and help us think about life in a little bit different ways, maybe our own lives through the stories that are written. Now, here are some authors that I'm going to suggest to you as fitting the same kind of category as just being very thought-provoking fiction. But I confess that I have not read these two authors, and some of you might really be shocked when I say their names because I know that they are really reader favorites, and somehow I've just never gotten around to reading them. That'd be Susie Finkbeiner and Nicole Deese. And I've just heard very high praise for all of their books, and I understand that they're kind of in the same genre and the same style. And I know some of these other ladies that I am mentioning to you now speak so highly of these other authors. So I would definitely recommend them to you, even though I have not read them myself. I have a Nicole Deese book on my bookshelf. I won it in a giveaway, and it's one that I am really looking forward to reading, but there's always that time issue, right? So there's so many good books out there, but hopefully I can read that one soon. But yeah, Susie Finkbeiner and Nicole Deese. Another one who writes women's fiction would be Catherine Ray, and she has some that her earlier books are more literary in the fact that they might be about Jane Austen, have some Jane Austen ties or classic literature ties, and those are very fun. And then some of her more recent books have been set during the Cold War, and her last one, I believe, is set during the 70s. I haven't read her most recent ones, but that's another author that is often recommended for this particular genre. Another one that has been writing for a very long time and has many different books would be Robin Jones Gunn. She wrote the Sister Chicks books, which are such fun romps of different friends taking trips together and just enjoying life together and being friends. And she has some young adult fiction too. Like I said, she's been writing for a long time. So Christy Miller and Sierra Jensen, those are names that some listeners might remember from their own teenage years. And so Robin has some more recent books too. Again, I have not read her recent ones. I've enjoyed the Sister Chicks books and some of her other books, but she has some more recent ones that are continuing in the same vein as friends taking trips together and things like that. So I would highly recommend Robin Jones Gunn. And Robin is actually going to be the Lifetime Achievement Award winner at the American Christian Fiction Conference coming up next month. And so I'm looking forward to hearing her speak there. We were talking a little bit about writers' conferences with Amanda. And if you are an aspiring author or if you have a story on your heart, I highly recommend writing conferences. It is not too late to sign up for ACFW coming up next month in Springfield, Missouri. To find out more about that, go to acfw.com or feel free to contact me, and I would be happy to share more about that with you. Now, please don't forget to follow me on social media at author Erin Mifflin, or visit my website, authorerinmifflin.com, to read my blog or sign up for my monthly newsletter. I would be happy to have you along for the journey. Until next time, happy reading!
Join us next week for another episode of The Well-Read Llama with your host, author Erin Mifflin. If you'd like to find out more about author Erin Mifflin, visit her Facebook and Instagram accounts.